Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. We continue in the 4th canto, chapter 7, entitled The Sacrifice Performed by Daksha. We are at text 50. Hopefully it's readable for everyone. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Aham Brahmacha Sarvascha Aham Brahmacha Sarvascha. It's really, so for those who don't know yet, this S with the thing on top is like schwarz oder schön, it's like a sound. Jagat Karanam Jagata Karanam Param Jagata Karanam Param Atmeshvara Upadrashta Atmeshvara Upadrashta Svayantrik Avisheshanaha Svayantrik Avisheshanaha. Śrī-Bhagavan Uvacha Aham Brahmacha Sarvascha Jagata Karanam Param Atmeshvara Upadrashta Svayantrik Avisheshanaha.
Can I ask you, upadrashta or upadrasta?
It's also it's a different it's just with the tongue. It's also it's also
Śrī-Bhagavan Uvacha
Śrī-Bhagavan Uvacha
Aham Brahma cha Sarvascha.
Aham Brahma cha Sarvascha.
Jagata Karanam Param.
Jagata Karanam Param.
Atmeshvara Upadrashta.
Atmeshvara Upadrashta.
Swayamdrik Avisheshanaha.
Swayandrik Avisheshanaha. Matachis.
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam.
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam.
Aham Brahma cha Sarvascha.
Aham Brahma cha Sarvascha.
Jagata Karanam Param.
Jagata Karanam Param.
Atmeshvara Upadrashta.
Atmeshvara Upadrashta.
Swayamdrika Visheshanaha.
Swayandrik Avisheshanaha. Shri Bhagavan, Lord Vishnu, Uvacha, said, Aham, I, Brahma, Cha, and Sharvaha, Lord Shiva, Cha, and Jagadaha, of the material manifestation, Karanam, cause, Param, supreme, Atma Ishvaraha, the super soul, Upadrashta, the witness, Swayamdrik, self-sufficient, Avisheshanaha, there is no difference. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Vishnu replied, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and I are the supreme cause of the material manifestation. I am the super soul, the self-sufficient witness, but impersonally there is no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva, and me. Purport. Lord Brahma was born out of the transcendental body of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva was born out of the body of Brahma. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai, Shri Ki Jai. Lord Vishnu, therefore, is the supreme cause. In the Vedas, also it is stated that in the beginning there was only Vishnu, Narayana, there was no Brahma or Shiva. Similarly, Shankaracharya confirmed this, Narayana Para. Narayana, or Lord Vishnu, is the origin, and Brahma and Shiva are manifested after creation. Lord Vishnu is also Atmeshvara, the super soul, in everyone. Under his direction, everything is prompted from within. For example, in the beginning of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is stated, Tene Brahma Rida. He first educated Lord Brahma from within. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.2, Lord Krishna states, Aham Adirhi Devanam. Lord Vishnu or Krishna is the origin of all demigods, including Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. In another place in Bhagavad Gita 10.8, Krishna states, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. Everything is generated from me. This includes all the demigods. Similarly, in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadi Asya Yataha, and in Upanishads is the statement, Yato va imani bhutani jayante. Everything is generated from Lord Vishnu. Everything is maintained by him, and everything is annihilated by his energy. Therefore, by their actions and reactions, the energies which come from him create the cosmic manifestations and also dissolve the whole creation. Thus, the Lord is the cause and also the effect. Whatever effect we see in the interaction of his energy, and because the energy is generated from him, he is both cause and effect. Simultaneously, everything is different and the same. It is said that everything is Brahman. Sarvam kal idam Brahma. In the highest vision, nothing is beyond Brahman, and therefore Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are certainly non-different from him. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Svabrantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagishayasya vadhane lakshmiriyasya chavakshasi yasya te hridaye samvit tam narasimham aham vaje pralada hridayaladam bhaktavitya vidaram sharatindurjim vande parindra vandanam harim. The verse once more. Lord Vishnu replied, Brahma, Lord Shiva and I are the supreme cause of the material manifestation. I am the supersoul, the self-sufficient witness. But impersonally there is no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva and me. I felt in this verse particularly there's at least one very potent philosophical point that is discussed thoroughly in so many places in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and Srila Prabhupada is also dedicating a lot of his purpose to this whole conception of oneness and difference between Krishna and all of his energies. Mostly we may tend to hear the the negative way of oneness, which is rejected. There's the so-called impersonalist philosophy, or monism, voidism, how it is called, which practically states that individuality neither in us nor in the Lord is existing. It's a negation of, therefore, a actually negative oneness. At the same time, as we hear in this verse, there's also a positive oneness, which is actually very essential for all spiritual practitioners to understand. Because yoga means uniting with the Lord or reconnecting, and there has to be common ground. One cannot relate to another living entity, which would be of a completely different substance or category beyond anything we are. Because also we understand, if we are among people, we need to have, for example, we need to share a common language. If we wouldn't speak at all the language of the other person, not just verbally but maybe also physically, we would have a hard time to relate, to exchange, to have a relationship. Relationships means relating. So similarly also with the Supreme Lord, there must be some oneness, some sameness, which is a level on which the Jiva and Krishna can meet. Right? Otherwise, if we only focus on how we are different from Krishna, then we might have a problem with how to identify ourselves in relationship to Krishna. And I would like to focus today in this class on this positive oneness with the Supreme, and carefully also look at certain Shastric quotes that support actually the understanding that we should identify with Krishna in a certain sense of oneness, but which I consciously call positive oneness, distinct from the negative oneness of the Mayavatis. Alright? In Bhagavad Gita in 17:15 we find the verse Anudvegacharam Vakyam Satyam Priya Hitam Chayat Svadhyaya Pyasanam Cheva Vanmayam Tapa Uchyate. It relates to the different types of austerities of speech. And a few items are mentioned. The first is, the speech should not be agitating or disturbing to someone. Then Satyam, Priya, Hitam means truthful. Satyam, Priya, pleasing. Satyam, Priya, Hitam means beneficial. And then the last thing which I want to emphasize today is Svadhyaya Pyasanam. Svadhyaya means residing or relating to Vedic scriptures. Srila Prabhupada quotes comments in the purport to this verse 17:15. If one makes a statement in spiritual circles, if there are discussions, one should be at once able to base one's statement on Shastra, make references to show where it is written, where it is said. Particularly if it is about topics that are beyond our conception, perception, logic. So therefore I would like to present today a few particular Shastric points to address this topic of positive oneness with the Lord, and hope at the same time it might be pleasing and beneficial for all the listeners. I would like to start with taking this verse into two parts. Here said Brahma and Lord Shiva are mentioned, and how they are together with Vishnu are the supreme cause of material manifestation. It's one of those beautiful places where Vishnu himself is speaking. We can maybe shortly recall there's this sacrificial arena. There was a whole intense foreplay to that appearance of Lord Vishnu in this arena. the whole story between Shiva and Daksha and how so many things happened, tragic things happened. So, but now, after Lord Vishnu has been pacified with prayers, or have been glorified, now he himself also had taking up the word and now saying this verse. And he identifies himself also as the super soul, the self-sufficient witness. And the second part, which is my emphasis today, but impersonally there's no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva and me. So this non-difference between those deities is important, because these kind of shlokas in different environments of saints or followers of Vedic scriptures in India and wherever, these kind of verses might be taken in this classic monistic sense. You know, that everything is one, there's no individuality, no personality in the Lord. Whereas also in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is highlighting, particularly at the end, how we have actually the Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva philosophy, which means that we understand ourselves as everything as one and at the same time different from Krishna, which is in itself a logical contradiction. In our world it is, if something is really one, it is not different. And if it is different, it is not one. So Achintya actually explains or addresses that, saying it is inconceivable. So, but what do we do with a philosophy that is inconceivable? You know, we accept it with faith. This is our attitude. That is what we say. Therefore, svadhyaya pyasanam cheva. We refer to the Shastras and rely on the statements and commentaries of those persons that we consider self-realized or which have attained the platform of transcendence, and that they are personalities who really see. And I would like also today refer a lot to Lord Brahma. In the previous chapters, a lot of space and emphasis has been given on who is Lord Shiva, and at the same time it's also interesting to hear a bit more about who is Lord Brahma, since they're all, together with Vishnu, are these very significant deities, and Lord Brahma actually is appearing quite a lot in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. He's actually the head, the beginning of our Sampradaya. We are in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And we hear in the second canto, similarly to the Sri Brahma Samhita, his biography. How he actually personally, by his tapasya, gained entrance into Vaikuntha. He spoke with Narayan, shook hands with Narayan. And Lord Narayan spoke the Chatu Shloki to him, which are the 4 essential verses of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So, and also in many different places he appears. In the second canto also Narada Muni speaks to him and inquires, it seems you are the Supreme Lord. How is that? Because he is creating masterfully, and it seems he's the Supreme Lord because he is in charge of the secondary creation. There's the primary creation, which is done by Lord Vishnu. He manifests the material energy, manifests the elements, exhales the universes out of his skin pores. And then within manifests as Garbhodakasha. Vishnu fills the universe half with water, lays down on the Sheshanaga, and out of his navel the lotus springs or stems on which Lord Brahma is being born, although his name is Swayambhu, the one who has no birth, which means there's no father and mother in a biological sense, so Brahma is unborn. So he is empowered to be the architect of the universe, quite a powerful being actually. And Narada Muni is clarifying whether it is correct to look at Lord Brahma as the Supreme Lord. And Lord Brahma is confirming, yes, it might appear, if you look at my wonderful deeds, you might get this impression. But in fact, I'm not the Supreme Lord. Brahma is also very honest. He's not inclined to be looked at as Supreme Lord. And also Narada Muni is already pointing out why he's asking. He's saying, we still have to wonder about this, whether you're the Supreme Lord, because we see you performed intense austerities in order also to become capable of doing what you do. And this means some higher instance or being had to empower him in order that he is as powerful as he is. And Srila Prabhupada also points out, this is one of the things. God is always God. He doesn't have to achieve the godliness, so to speak. No, he is it, eternally, unchangeable. But he can empower other living beings to be very similar to him. And it's even said that sometimes the post of Brahma is actually being taken by Vishnu. And let's hear from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam a bit about who Lord Brahma is. And here it is stated in chapter 2, text 19, Hiranyagarbha sukshmutra stulu vairacha samkyakaha bhogaya shrishtaye chabut padma bhur iti sadvidha. Regarding Brahma, in this world, his subtle form is known as Hiranyagarbha and his gross form as Vairaj. And he also appears as the lotus-born one, Padma Bhu. He accepts these forms for furthering his enjoyment and for creating the universe. And there is a purport by His Grace Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada and very learned Sanskrit scholar. The personality of Godhead himself sometimes plays Brahma's role, and sometimes he empowers a jiva for this purpose. The previous verses describe the first case, and now the second is being considered. Hiranyagarbha is the name for Brahma in the subtle body, the Mahat Tattva. So we heard in Lord Shiva's case, there is a prototype form, let's call it like that, Sadashiva, Shambhu, which is actually even Vishnu Tattva. And then from him there are also again, let's call it partial expansions, as Vishnu has himself partial expansions. And also Brahma has different forms, like the Mahatattva is the material energy itself, or the manifested, from Brahman transformed into Mahatattva. Only the Supreme Lord can see him in that form, the demigods cannot. Vairaj is the name for Brahma in his grosser universal body. Many yogis meditate on this form. So it's said, like every one of us, we have a kshetra, a body of which we are conscious. But there's a limit to this being conscious, which is the borders of our physical body. Some have a bit more capacity, some less. And it's said actually Lord Brahma's body is the universe and he's conscious of what's going on there. So he has quite a powerful kshetra, I say very, very much extended consciousness. His third body, with 4 heads, 8 eyes and 8 arms, can be seen by the demigods and other living beings, who can then receive benedictions from him. So this is usually the Brahma we hear about, like also who is speaking now, or like who is being addressed in this verse. And instead, usually the Vairaj becomes 4-headed Brahma for creating and ruling, but sometimes the Supreme Lord Vishnu himself becomes Brahma and creates the universe. Thus the Padma Purana states, in some Mahakalpas a jiva becomes Brahma due to the exalted quality of his worship of the Lord, and in some Mahakalpas Mahavishnu assumes the role of Brahma. During a Mahakalpa in which Vishnu becomes the creator, Vairaj Brahma enters within him and enjoys all facilities for material happiness. Thus Brahma is sometimes a jiva and sometimes the Supreme Lord. And this verse makes an interesting statement, which is also being addressed in the purport. In the kalpas, when Vishnu himself becomes Brahma, what does the jiva Brahma do? Does he achieve liberation at the very beginning of his life? No, Brahma can be liberated only after living out his lifespan of 100 years. As Dvaipayana Vyasa states in the Vedanta Sutras, Yavat adhikaranam avashtitir adhikarikkanam. The appointed administrative demigods must remain in their post for the duration of their terms. This verse answers the question posed above. In Kalpas, when Vishnu is Brahma, the Jiva Brahma enters the spiritual body of Vishnu with both his Vairaj body and his subtle Hiranyagarbha body. So we understand already, when we think of Brahma, we have to consider 3 features, so to speak. Similarly with Lord Shiva. It's very interesting to look at that. The Jiva Brahma thus enters the offerings the demigods make in his name And Gopi Purandana Prabhu says, just see the generosity of the Supreme Lord in granting his servant the ability to enjoy the advantages of his position without having to take any responsibility. So in this case, he can be Brahma, and he can practically just remain within the Vishnu Brahma, and at the same time everything is happening as if he would be Lord Brahma. So I wanted to shortly venture into the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and to have some bit more detail on who is Lord Brahma. Because the statement of this verse is that Krishna says, impersonally there is no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva and me. So there are different considerations. In the purport it becomes clear, since everything is emanating from Brahman, everything is in this way related to another. We also say, when we start to get to know Krishna consciousness, we often hear, you are spirit soul, and the Sanskrit phrase would mean aham brahmasmi. I am Brahman, which means I'm of spiritual nature. And Krishna is also Brahman, of spiritual nature. And the idea is to identify positively with the Lord. At the same time, it is, of course, emphasized, do not think you are the Supreme Lord, but you are identical in the sense that you have the same substance with a different quality and quantity, or qualities, because we don't have all the qualities of the Lord, but some to some extent. And the Mayavadi philosophy is confusing that, making it as oneness in an absolute sense. You merge and lose identity. Krishna has no personal identity. And this is always very strongly rejected. But at the same time, what should not be rejected is the positive oneness that I mentioned before. This is actually essential. Because what is happening when we don't have a positive identification with Krishna, we have a so-called positive identification with the body, which is illusion. And the tendency is, of course, if we negate the body, I'm not this body, and if I would say, if I subtract everything that I'm not, I arrive at zero. This is usually by logic how also like this whole impersonalism develops. You can check for yourself. If you would look into yourself and try to understand this core self, the sense of self that you can perceive, you will find that you do not see like there's no visual of yourself. You have a felt experience of that there is an I am. But what this I is still a mystery. It's kind of wrapped still in a mysterious cloud of ignorance, so to speak. And it's an abstract perception. Therefore, the tendency is often to consider Atman impersonal, simply because I can't perceive personal features. Or I would say, if there are personal features, that's the same as matter. That's the mistake that is happening for the conditioned soul. So, therefore, it's so important to follow the Shastric arguments in philosophy to arrive at the positive understanding of Atman, that is not only my intellectual or conscious effort to see and think, but there's a process of purification, which means practical devotional activity, by which I can gradually shake off the wrong identity of the body, at the same time establish the positive identity as this individual servant of the Lord, a personality which relates to another personality. Prabhupada also says often, bhakti is, first of all, he defines as devotional service. He never says only love or loving something, bhakti, not just as love, but he says it's devotional service. Because love is expressed within activity. Simply stating love, or I love you is not sufficient. It might be a shallow sentiment without any substance, but love is shown by activity. And Krishna also, or like to the verse, patram pushpam balam toyam yomi bhaktya pranashyati. Prayachati. Once your Prabhupada is pointing out, because the verse says, if one offers with love and devotion a fruit, a bit of water, a leaf, I will accept. And in one lecture, Srila Prabhupada says, love means you started to give something. So loving means actually giving, whereas the other thing is taking. And usually conditioned souls very much in a take mode. So devotional service means giving to the Lord with affection. And this requires, Prabhupada says, there must be a servant and someone who is being served, two personalities. You know, you cannot serve something that is not existing, so to speak, someone. You cannot serve the impersonal Brahman. There's no reciprocation possible, or some impersonal concept, because it is devoid of the possibility of service. As Prabhupada says, because the logic is service requires servant and the one who is being served. So that's the Vaishnava philosophy. And Srila Prabhupada makes a good point regarding positive oneness in the purport to Bhagavad Gita 1854, one of my favorite shlokas. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na shochati na kankshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mat bhaktim labate param. And this verse is stating that if one has attained the platform of Brahman, means the transcendental, here said a transcendental platform, one who is thus transcendentally situated, at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. And let's pay close attention to the purport. Srila Prabhupada says, to the impersonalist, achieving the Brahmabhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further, to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in the state of liberation called Brahmabhuta, oneness with the Absolute. And now he says, without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto Him. And I find this a very important point of this purport. One has to attain the oneness in order that actually pure devotional service from the pure Jiva to the pure Lord is happening. Oneness means thus the Jiva, because Prasanna Atma in this verse, Brahmabhuta Prasanna Atma means the Atma becomes completely free from the influence of the modes of nature. Means becomes uncovered. No more Rajas, no more Tamas, no more Sattva Gun. And then it is free and again situated in its Brahman nature. And on that platform it can relate to Krishna. It's also said Krishna has no material body, he doesn't need or take material things. What he exchanged, the liberated souls, they have spiritual bodies. They give spiritual things to Krishna, or transcendental things. So therefore the idea is, as long as one is conditioned by matter, one is to some degree in a state of practice of devotional service. But he says here, mat bhaktim labate param, when one has attained this transcendental platform, if one is situated there, acting from that mode, then actually it's true pure devotional service. The other activities in themselves are pure devotional activities, but pure devotional service it becomes if I'm truly in the consciousness who I am as a spiritual servant of the Lord. And here he says here, without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto Him. And then he says, in the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. And here again we have the subtlety of the Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. We are told, you are one with Krishna. And think yourself to be one with Krishna, but be careful to don't make that an impersonal conception of merging, but understand you are of the same quality and nature, but at the same time you remain something different as an individual living entity. And often the metaphors giving of the sun and the sunshine, the sun particles are identical with the sun. At the same time they are something different. They are not the sun. No? So in this way we should meditate on actually not just I'm part and parcel of Krishna, I'm identical with Him and I'm supposed to be reunited with Him. That's the whole mission also of Mahaprabhu. Krishna is always coming to reclaim the fallen souls. because we are in a situation where we don't belong in a material body. You know? And also in the Upanishad, one person, it is not said who. The Upanishad is an interesting writing. Upanishad, the name means, Upa means close, or Nishidat means to bring, or like to bring closer to God. It also means sitting close to the Guru, but its one meaning is to bring a person closer to God. That is the meaning of an Upanishad. And the Sri Upanishad, or Ish Upanishad as we have it, is gradually building up from establishing who is the Supreme Lord, what is transcendental knowledge, to the point where a person, one student, it's not said who, a student prays to Krishna. Now, since I'm in knowledge, I understand what is Brahman, but now what's happening is, I can't see you. He says, your effulgence is so brilliant, radiant, I don't see anything, it's just oneness instead of light. And this person is praying, please remove that effulgence so that I can see you. And he makes an interesting point. This person is listing a few qualities of Krishna first, saying it's the shloka. Just give me a second. Shloka 16 or mantra 16. I don't have the meter to chant it, so therefore I better don't. Here it says, O my Lord, O primeval philosopher, maintainer of the universe, O regulative principle, destination of the pure devotees, well-wisher of the progenitors of mankind, please remove the effulgence of your transcendental rays so that I can see your form of bliss. You are the eternal supreme personality of Godhead, like unto the sun, as am I. In the German translation it's a bit clearer. He's practically saying, you are like the sun and I am too. So if this person is stating, we are of the same substance. We are both of Brahman, and therefore I relate to you deeply. We are, this gives a sense of belonging. If I have a sense of oneness, I also belong. If I have a sense of difference or strong difference, I often have a sense of not belonging. If people around me are too different from me, I don't really connect. I felt that often in India. For some time it's good to be there and it's amazing. Particularly I favor South India, of course, because of the many Vishnu temples. But being in India simply in terms of climate, in terms of the people, the language, the way of living, I just feel like I don't fit at all in there. And besides, also, there's an interesting role switch. Since I'm from Germany, we have the historical package or ballast. We still have to carry this whole thing of being a big-time racist. Usually people connect with Germans; they're Nazis. That's often happening since the Second World War, although in so many countries there is exactly that going on, but still it's particularly focused on that. But when you go to India, you can switch roles. You are the foreigner. And in some temples it's clearly written, no foreigners allowed. That means you, white fellows, you don't get in here. And I was really concerned that we went to Sri Rangam, and it's such a beautiful place. And you enter the Sri Rangam temple, like there are descriptions in the third canto, where the four Kumaras enter the 7 gates until they arrive in Vaikuntha. And when you go to Sri Rangam, they have beautiful, huge gates with beautiful architecture. And you go one gate through another, and you enter the temple. Then there are the inner gates, and then in some gate it's written, no foreigners allowed. And I thought, oh my God, what's happening? How do I get in? Fortunately, first of all, I had, of course, a Tamil guide, like a devotee who came. And fortunately, it was not so strictly handled. So we moved in, some guards were there, and okay. So in some places they did not let us in. Because you're white, you're not Hindu. And I felt it was an interesting experience to be the foreigner and be this. Now could go and say, yeah, you're a racist, for change. The other way. No, but yes, it was interesting experience. But all in all, I felt I don't belong here simply also I feel home in the middle of Europe, since this is kind of my bodily identification. That's where I am at with my thing. And you feel here I belong, here I can act and relate. So there's some oneness needed, otherwise how do I relate? That has to be common ground, so to speak. So in a deeper philosophical sense, that means we understand ourselves as expansions of Krishna, which I find an interesting point. We say Krishna expands himself in many forms, and the jivas are one of his expansions. We come from him. It's said from Brahman, actually. Also in the Krishna book we find there's a story when Krishna and Arjuna together they travel to the causal ocean and visit Mahavishnu. And in this story it's also some quotes are being there. Srila Prabhupada clearly says how actually Vishnu manifests also through the Brahmajyoti, the jivas. That Mahavishnu is supposed to be the origin of us. Or like the Brahmajyoti itself manifests everything. Also Brahma Samhita confirms that Lord Brahma actually, who speaks here, says that the Brahman is the origin of all creations. That's the soil, so to speak. From there everything comes. Like also here Srila Prabhupada quotes in this verse, Sarvam Kalmidam Brahma. Everything is different, and in the same it is said that everything is Brahman. We are also Brahman. Right? But it doesn't mean we are impersonal, but we are of a spiritual substance. So I think this distinction has been made very clear. So, and actually, there already, I think this covers practically most of the points I wanted to make so far. So we could open up. We could open up for discussion and questions. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki jai, Shishi Gaunitai ki jai. So the essential message for you was creating a positive sense of oneness with the Lord, identifying positively as one in contrast to negative oneness in the impersonal sense. So we discussed that.
Thank you, wonderful class. Another positive oneness that Srila Prabhupada is referring to is oneness of desire, oneness in desire. And we have same mission as the Lord. That's another type of positive oneness.
Thanks, Shanya.
After all I learned now, I wonder why we have this, one of these 10 offenses that Lord Shiva and Brahma are not equal to Lord.
Yes, because they are one at the same time different. If you enter, as we might have noticed, for example, the Laghu Bhagavatamrita is giving us these informations where Srila Rupa Goswami is bringing Shastric evidence, making us aware that there are different manifestations of Brahma Tattva, so to speak, and Shiva Tattva, that there are different gradations. It said even Lord Shiva has himself his own Avesha avatars. Lord Rudra manifests different, can empower different living entities to act like him. As, for example, Vishnu also empowers a jiva, like Ananta Shesha, for example, is considered to be a jiva, that he's practically a Shakti Avesha avatar and so on. I think this refers, my understanding is that usually the deities Shiva and Brahma, referring to the four-headed Brahma and the Rudra in the material world, not necessarily to the higher transcendental forms or like the Vishnu Tattva form like Sadashiva, but it refers to the demigod level where people are used to worship, and since they are distinct, it's clearly said the nectar of devotion gives us a very good sense of how do we distinguish them, because they have different amounts of qualities compared to Vishnu. Vishnu has 60 qualities from the 64, and Brahma and Shiva have 50 up to 55 to some degree. So therefore, also on that level, one cannot make them equal. So, but then also since Vishnu here, this verse is highlighting, and also the Prabhupada is highlighting how Vishnu is the supreme cause. And Srila Prabhupada is giving a lot of space to that, saying Lord Vishnu therefore is the supreme cause. In the Vedas it is also stated that in the beginning there was only Vishnu, Narayan, there was no Brahma or Shiva. So since both of them come from Vishnu, Vishnu is established as the supreme origin, and this is actually also what he says in the Chatu Shloki in the first verse, making clear, before me, Narayan, there was nothing. When there's something, it's also me who is the actual existence and maintainer. And when there's again nothing, so to speak, in terms of creation, it's again me who remains. So essentially, Vishnu is the supreme existence of everything. So I think in that way, we should we look at that we make always Vishnu supreme. Although he says here, these are my manifestations, these are my energies, and they're at the same time not different from me. I guess, I hope this clarifies or answers your question. Just 1 second. It's okay? Then we can maybe pass the microphone there.
Hi Krishna, thank you very much for this point on oneness, because I often see that as devotees we are so scared of the concept of oneness that we tend to not speak about it. But interestingly, last week I was doing some research on something else, and I came across this purport of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 3rd, Chapter 28 and Text 35, where Srila Prabhupada refers to oneness. And he says that yes, there should be oneness. This dovetailing of the mind with the desires of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called nirvana, or making the mind one with the Supreme Lord. So, and then Srila Prabhupada goes on to talk about how, as devotees, we do strive for oneness, but it's a different kind of oneness. We try to make our mind one with Krishna, or we try to desire Krishna, or his service, and that is how we see oneness. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, particularly what stays with me always is the sense of identity, because often I come to a point which is frustrating for me, where I mentioned before, I can try to somehow grasp the sense of self, this I. I can somehow understand, okay, I'm different from this body, I can observe it, and since I can observe it, so to say, from this distance, tells me I'm different from it, I can observe my mind, and I can go in this way a bit deeper and deeper and understand the self is not even, it's nothing that is under the influence of time and so on. At the same time, it still remains a mystery, it's not tangible. You know, and often I feel a bit impatient and sometimes frustrated. When will I finally see it or get it? You know. So therefore I'm often thinking of this identification with Krishna as one. Yeah. All right. Then we conclude here. Granted, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Express Krishna Mahaprabhu ki
Jai.